He opened the security app expecting to catch her slipping up. 11 caregivers before her had failed, stolen from him, betrayed him, left his sons worse than they found them. So when he saw those 3 wheelchairs sitting empty in the middle of the living room, his stomach dropped. Then he saw them, his 3 paralyzed sons standing, taking steps, walking toward her outstretched arms. Andrew's phone slipped from his hand, his back hit the wall, and the man who had accepted impossible as final watched it shatter on a screen in his own living room. 2 years ago, Andrew Grant lost everything that mattered. His wife Sarah died during childbirth. 45 minutes after delivering triplets, she was gone. No warning, no goodbye, just a cold hospital room and 3 premature babies fighting for their lives. Andrew held her hand until it went cold. Then he walked out to meet his sons, Philip, Eric, Adam. 3 tiny bodies, 3 uncertain futures. The doctors didn't wait long to deliver the second blow, cerebral palsy. All 3 boys, severe, the kind that settles into muscles and bones and doesn't let go. Mr. Grant, we need to prepare you. Based on the brain imaging and muscle response tests, walking is highly unlikely. Possibly never. Andrew heard the words, but they didn't land. Not then. He was still burying his wife in his mind. Weeks passed, then months. The boys didn't improve. They didn't hit milestones. They sat in custom wheelchairs, small bodies, still eyes, distant. Andrew hired the best therapists money could buy, flew in specialists from Europe, purchased equipment that cost more than most people's homes. Nothing changed. The boys didn't walk, they barely moved, and Andrew, alone in his Connecticut mansion, started to accept what the doctors said. His sons would never stand, never run, never chase each other through the hallways like he once imagined. He buried that hope right next to Sarah. Then came the caregivers, 11 in 18 months. The first quit after 2 weeks, said watching the boys was too sad. The second spent more time on her phone than with his sons. Andrew fired her on the spot. The third seemed perfect until he found out she'd sold photos of his boy's medical equipment to a tabloid for $600. After that, something broke inside him. One caregiver stole medication from the house. Another accessed his financial accounts and disappeared. Each one came with a smile and left with his trust bleeding out behind them. Andrew stopped seeing people. He saw risks. He installed cameras in every room, every hallway. He watched the footage at night, rewinding and zooming, looking for the lie, the angle, the betrayal he knew was coming. Control became his only protection. So when Angela Bailey walked through his front door, 29 years old, quiet, composed, Andrew didn't see a person. He saw the 12th failure waiting to happen. No improvising, he told her, not looking up from her file. No bonding, no hope speeches. Follow the medical protocol exactly. The doctors have made their prognosis clear. Angela nodded. I understand. But she didn't understand. Or maybe she understood too well, because Angela didn't follow his rules. She sang to those boys when no one was watching. She moved their legs in patterns the therapists never taught. She whispered words of encouragement like she believed they could hear her, like she believed they could become more than their diagnosis. And Andrew watched it all through his cameras. At first, he watched to catch her making mistakes. Then he watched because he couldn't look away, because something was happening in that house. Something small at first. Philip smiled during her songs. Eric's fingers twitched when she played music. Adam held his head up longer than he ever had before. Andrew told himself it meant nothing. He told himself hope was dangerous. He told himself the doctors knew best. But late at night, alone in his office, with the blue glow of monitors lighting his face, Andrew watched a woman fight for his sons, with nothing but patience and belief. And somewhere deep in his chest, in a place he thought had died with Sarah, something started to crack. He didn't trust it. He couldn't, because hope, when you've buried it that deep, doesn't feel like relief. It feels like a trap. But before we go any further, hit that subscribe button, like this video, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. If you've ever felt like hope was too risky, like believing again might break you, this story is for you. Sometimes miracles don't ask for permission, they just show up. The mansion woke up the same way every morning. Quiet. Not peaceful quiet, the kind of quiet that presses against your chest. Andrew stood at the kitchen window, coffee growing cold in his hands, watching the sun rise over the back garden. The gardener was already out there, trimming hedges that no one walked past anymore. The fountain in the center of the lawn hadn't run in months. Andrew kept meaning to call someone about it. He never did. Behind him, down the long hallway that led to the east wing, he heard the soft whir of a motorized wheelchair. The morning nurse was moving one of the boys, probably Eric. Eric liked to sit by the window in the therapy room when the light came through just right. Andrew didn't turn around. He used to. In the beginning, right after they came home from the hospital, Andrew would rush to every sound, every cry, every small movement. He would sit between their cribs for hours, watching their tiny chests rise and fall, terrified that if he looked away, something would go wrong. Sarah would have been better at this. She had wanted children more than anything. 5 years of trying, 3 rounds of IVF, and when she finally got pregnant with triplets, she cried for 2 days straight. Happy tears. The kind that come when something you've wanted for so long finally becomes real. Andrew remembered the nursery she designed. Pale yellow walls, a mural of elephants and giraffes, 3 cribs arranged in a half circle so the boys could see each other when they woke up. That nursery sat empty now. The boys slept in medical beds in the therapy room, adjustable frames, safety rails, monitors that tracked their breathing at night. The yellow room with the animal mural had become storage for equipment they'd tried once and abandoned. Andrew took a sip of cold coffee and winced. The house was too big. 27 rooms for a man who only used 3. His office, his bedroom, the kitchen when he remembered to eat. Everything else felt like a museum, preserved but lifeless. He'd bought this place for Sarah. She loved old architecture, the stone walls, the high ceilings. She said it felt like a home that had stories to tell. Now the only stories were the ones Andrew replayed on security footage at 2 in the morning. He set the coffee mug in the sink and walked toward his office. The hallway stretched long and dim. Family photos used to line these walls. Sarah insisted on it. Houses need faces, she'd say. Otherwise, they're just buildings. Andrew had taken them down 6 months after she died. He couldn't pass her smile 20 times a day. Couldn't see the hope in her eyes, the way she looked at him like he could fix anything. He'd failed her, failed their sons, failed every promise he'd made in that hospital room when he held her hand and told her he'd take care of them. The frames left faint outlines on the wallpaper, ghosts of a life that almost happened. Andrew pushed open his office door and sat at his desk. 3 monitors glowed on the wall: living room, hallway, therapy room. There they were, his sons. Philip sat in his blue wheelchair, staring at the bookshelf. Eric was by the window, just like Andrew guessed. Adam's eyes were closed, his small body still except for the gentle rise and fall of breathing. Angela moved between them, adjusting blankets, straightening toys. Her movements were slow and careful, like she understood that this room held something fragile. Andrew watched her hands. 11 caregivers, 11 failures, 11 reasons to believe she would be no different. But she'd been here 3 weeks now. No complaints, no shortcuts, no phone call she shouldn't make or cabinets she shouldn't open. Just quiet consistency. Andrew leaned back in his chair. That's what worried him most. Angela had a routine. Every morning she arrived in the therapy room at exactly 7. She'd greet the night nurse, review the boys' sleep charts, and then spend the first 10 minutes just sitting with them, not talking, not adjusting anything, just present. Andrew noticed this through the cameras. It bothered him at first. He was paying her to work, not to sit. But then he realized something. She wasn't sitting idle. She was watching, learning, studying the way Philip's fingers curled when he was uncomfortable, the way Eric's breathing changed when he needed repositioning, the way Adam's eyes flickered beneath closed lids during his morning rest. She was learning his sons in a way. Andrew had stopped trying to. On her fourth morning, Angela brought a small speaker into the therapy room. Nothing fancy, just a portable thing she pulled from her bag. She set it on the shelf and pressed play. Soft piano music filled the room. Andrew watched from his office, finger hovering over the intercom button. This wasn't in the protocol. The boys had specific sound therapy sessions on Thursdays, administered by a licensed therapist. Random music wasn't part of the plan. But he didn't press the button because Philip turned his head. It was small, just a few degrees to the right, but Andrew saw it clearly on the screen. His son, who spent most days staring at the same spot on the wall, turned toward the sound. Angela noticed too. She didn't make a fuss, didn't clap or cheer. She just smiled softly and adjusted the volume slightly higher. Eric's fingers twitched against his armrest. Andrew leaned closer to the monitor. Angela knelt beside Eric's wheelchair, her movements slow and deliberate. She didn't touch him right away, just positioned herself in his line of sight and waited. "You like that?" she asked quietly. "It's Chopin. My grandmother used to play it on Sunday mornings." Eric didn't respond, but his fingers twitched again. Angela reached out and placed her hand near his, not touching, just close enough that he could feel her warmth if he wanted. She stayed like that for a long moment. Andrew's throat tightened. When was the last time he'd sat with his sons like that?
When was the last time he'd just been present, without an agenda, without checking monitors or reviewing therapy reports or calculating how much the latest specialist was costing him? He couldn't remember. That afternoon, Andrew found himself walking toward the therapy room. He told himself he needed to check the equipment, make sure everything was properly maintained. But when he reached the door and heard Angela's voice inside, he stopped. She was reading not a medical manual or a therapy guidebook, a children's story, something about a rabbit who wanted to learn to fly. "Everyone told him rabbits don't fly," Angela read, her voice gentle and clear. But the little rabbit didn't listen. He climbed to the top of the hill every single day, and every single day he jumped. Andrew peered through the crack in the door. The boys were arranged in a half circle around her. She sat on the floor, cross-legged, the book open in her lap. Her eyes moved between the pages and their faces, checking, connecting. "Did he ever fly?" she asked them. "What do you think?" Silence, but Adam's eyes were open, fixed on her face. Andrew stepped back from the door. His chest felt strange, tight and loose at the same time. He walked back to his office without entering the room. That night, reviewing the footage, he watched her read that story 3 more times, watched the way she changed her voice for different characters, watched the way she paused to let the words settle, watched his sons watch her. Something was shifting in that house. Andrew could feel it. He just didn't trust it yet. Andrew couldn't stop watching. Every night after the house went dark, he'd sit in his office with the glow of monitors painting shadows across his face. He told himself it was caution, responsibility, a father protecting his children from another betrayal. But that wasn't true anymore. He was watching because something was happening, something he didn't understand. Week 3. Angela had stopped following the protocol entirely. It started small. The music, the stories, things he could dismiss as harmless additions to her routine. But then it grew. One evening, Andrew pulled up the afternoon footage and nearly choked on his whiskey. Angela was on the floor with Philip. She had his small legs in her hands and was moving them slowly, rhythmically, left, right, like he was walking, like his muscles remembered something his brain had forgotten. Andrew's jaw clenched. This wasn't in any therapy plan. No specialist had prescribed this. She was improvising, breaking every rule he'd set. He reached for his phone to call her, fire her, end this before it went any further. But then Philip laughed. Not a big laugh, just a small sound, barely more than breath. But Andrew heard it through the speakers, and his hand froze over the phone. His son was laughing. When was the last time he'd heard that sound? Andrew set the phone down. His hands were shaking. He kept watching. Angela moved to Eric next. She positioned a small toy truck just beyond his reach on the tray attached to his wheelchair, too far for him to grab without effort. "Come on, sweetheart," she said softly. "You can do it. Just a little stretch." Eric's arms stayed still. Angela waited, patient, unhurried. "I know you can," she whispered. "I believe in you." Andrew watched the screen, holding his breath without realizing it. Eric's fingers twitched. His arm moved slowly, painfully slowly. He reached forward, his small hand stretched toward the truck. He touched it.
Angela's face broke into the widest smile. "Yes! Look at you! Look at what you just did!" Eric's fingers curled around the toy. Andrew's eyes burned. He rewound the footage, watched it again and again. That small arm reaching, those tiny fingers closing around plastic. Such a simple movement, something any other child would do without thinking. But his son had just done the impossible. Andrew rubbed his face with both hands. This was dangerous, all of it. Angela was giving his sons false hope, pushing them beyond what the doctors said they could do. When she failed, and she would fail, the disappointment would destroy them, destroy him. He should fire her tomorrow morning, first thing. But instead of drafting a termination letter, Andrew pulled up more footage. Adam, the smallest of the three, the one who kept his eyes closed most of the day. Angela sat beside his wheelchair with a picture book. She wasn't reading it, just showing him the colors. "This one's blue," she said, pointing, "like the sky. And this one's yellow, like sunshine." Adam's eyes were open, fixed on the page. "You see it, don't you?" Angela whispered. "You see everything." She turned the page. Adam's hand lifted from his... Angela's face broke into the widest smile. "Yes! Look at you! Look at what you just did!" Eric's fingers curled around the toy. Andrew's eyes burned. He rewound the footage, watched it again and again. That small arm reaching, those tiny fingers closing around plastic. Such a simple movement, something any other child would do without thinking. But his son had just done the impossible. Andrew rubbed his face with both hands. This was dangerous, all of it. Angela was giving his sons false hope, pushing them beyond what the doctors said they could do. When she failed, and she would fail, the disappointment would destroy them, destroy him. He should fire her tomorrow morning, first thing. But instead of drafting a termination letter, Andrew pulled up more footage. Adam, the smallest of the three, the one who kept his eyes closed most of the day. Angela sat beside his wheelchair with a picture book. She wasn't reading it, just showing him the colors. "This one's blue," she said, pointing, "like the sky. And this one's yellow, like sunshine." Adam's eyes were open, fixed on the page. "You see it, don't you?" Angela whispered. "You see everything." She turned the page. Adam's hand lifted from his lap, just an inch, but it lifted. Angela noticed. She gently took his small hand and placed it on the book. "There you go, sweet boy. You touch it. It's yours." Andrew watched his son's fingers press against the paper. Something cracked in his chest, deep and painful. He closed the laptop, sat in the darkness of his office, and for the first time in 2 years, Andrew Grant didn't know what to believe. Andrew didn't plan to confront her. It just happened. 3 weeks of watching through screens, 3 weeks of footage that kept him awake at night, 3 weeks of seeing his sons respond to a woman who broke every rule he'd set. He couldn't take it anymore. Tuesday afternoon, Andrew left his office and walked down the hallway toward the therapy room. His footsteps echoed against the marble. Each step felt heavier than the last. He didn't knock, just pushed the door open and stood there. Angela was on the floor with Adam. She had his small legs positioned in her hands, moving them in that same rhythmic pattern, left, right, like she was teaching his muscles to remember something they'd never learned. She looked up when the door opened, no surprise in her eyes, no fear, just calm acknowledgement. "Mr. Grant?" Andrew's voice came out harder than he intended. "What are you doing?" Angela didn't stop the movement.
Motor pattern training. It helps build neural pathways. That's not in the protocol. No, sir, it's not. Andrew stepped into the room. I gave you specific instructions. Follow the medical plan. No improvising, no experimental treatments. Angela gently lowered Adam's legs and stood up. She wiped her hands on her pants and faced him directly. The medical plan has them sitting in wheelchairs all day with minimal stimulation. That's not treatment, that's maintenance. Andrew's jaw tightened. The doctors gave you a prognosis based on statistics. Angela's voice stayed even, but something fierce lived beneath the surface. They looked at scans and charts and told you what usually happens. They didn't tell you what's possible. They're specialists. They've seen hundreds of cases like this. Have they seen your sons? The question hung in the air. Andrew stared at her. Excuse me? Angela took a breath. Your boys aren't statistics, Mr. Grant. They're not case studies or data points. They're children.
And children deserve someone who sees them, not their diagnosis. Andrew felt heat rise in his chest. You think you know better than doctors who've studied this for decades? I think I know that giving up on a child is the one thing guaranteed to fail. Silence. Andrew's hands were shaking. From anger or something else, he couldn't tell. You're filling their heads with false hope, he said quietly. When this doesn't work, and it won't, they'll be devastated. Angela looked at him for a long moment. Something shifted in her eyes. Not pity, something deeper. They're 2 years old, Mr. Grant. They don't know what false hope is. They only know what they feel. And right now, they feel someone believing in them. She paused, maybe for the first time. The words landed like a slap. Andrew opened his mouth, closed it. Angela turned back to Adam, kneeling beside his wheelchair. You hired me to care for them, she said softly, not looking at Andrew. That's what I'm doing. She resumed the leg movements, gentle, patient, consistent. Andrew stood there, watching her ignore him. His mind screamed to fire her, right now, call the agency and have her replaced by morning. But his feet wouldn't move, because deep down, in a place he'd locked away, a voice whispered something he didn't want to hear. What if she's right? Andrew turned and walked out. He didn't say another word, but he didn't fire her either. That night, Andrew couldn't sleep. He sat at his desk with a termination letter open on his laptop. The cursor blinked at the end of the first sentence, patient and unforgiving. Dear Miss Bailey, effective immediately. Your services are no longer required. He'd written those words 11 times before. Different names, same outcome. His fingers knew the rhythm. Type the letter, call the agency, sign the paperwork, move on. But tonight, his hands wouldn't cooperate. Andrew stared at the screen until his eyes ached. Then he minimized the document and pulled up the security footage. The house was quiet, lights dimmed. Everyone should have been asleep hours ago, but the therapy room camera showed a soft glow coming from inside. Angela was still there. Andrew leaned closer to the monitor. She sat on the floor in the center of the room, cross-legged, surrounded by 3 wheelchairs arranged in a half circle. A small lamp on the shelf cast warm shadows across her face. The boys were supposed to be in their medical beds by now. The night nurse should have transferred them an hour ago, but there they were, still with her. Angela wasn't doing exercises, wasn't following any protocol. She was just sitting with them, humming a melody Andrew didn't recognize, something old and gentle, like a song passed down through generations. Andrew turned up the volume. Her voice came through the speakers, soft and clear. She reached up and touched Philip's hand where it rested on his armrest. Didn't grab it, just laid her fingers over his. You did so good today, she whispered. I'm so proud of you. Do you know that? I'm proud of you. Philip's fingers curled slightly. Just a small movement, but intentional. Andrew's throat tightened. Angela held his hand for a long moment, then moved to Eric. She adjusted his blanket, tucking the edges around his small legs, even though it didn't need adjusting. Her hands moved with such gentleness, such care, like he was made of something precious. Sweet boy, she murmured, smoothing his hair back from his forehead.
You're so much stronger than anyone knows. I see it.
Even if they don't, I see it. Eric's eyes were closed, but Andrew noticed his breathing had changed. Slower, calmer, the way a child breathes when they feel safe. Then Angela turned to Adam, the smallest of the three, the one who kept his eyes shut most of the day, like the world was too much to take in. Angela lifted his tiny hand and pressed it against her cheek, her eyes closed. "I see you," she whispered. "All of you, every piece. You're not broken, baby. You're just waiting, and I'll wait with you, as long as it takes." A tear slipped down her cheek. Andrew stared at the screen. This woman, this stranger, she was sitting in his house at 11 at night, crying over his sons, talking to them like they understood, like they mattered, like their lives meant something beyond medical charts and therapy schedules. When was the last time he'd done that? When was the last time he'd just sat with them? Not as a worried father calculating costs, not as a man reviewing therapy reports, just as their dad, just being present. He couldn't remember. The realization hit him like a fist to the chest. Andrew closed the laptop slowly. The termination letter sat unfinished in its window, waiting. He should send it. Logic demanded it. Angela was dangerous. She was filling his sons with hope that would shatter them. She was defying doctors who'd studied these conditions for decades. She was breaking every rule he'd established to protect his family. But another voice spoke, quieter, deeper. What if she sees something you stopped looking for? Andrew stood up and walked to the window. The garden sat dark below, moonlight catching the edges of untrimmed hedges. He thought of Sarah. What would she say if she could see him now? See what he'd become? A man who watched his sons through screens? A man so afraid of losing more that he'd stopped being present for what remained? She would hate this. She would hate him. Andrew pressed his forehead against the cold glass. He deleted the termination letter, told himself it was exhaustion. Finding another caregiver meant paperwork, background checks, interviews. He didn't have the energy. But as he climbed the stairs toward his empty bedroom, he heard a soft humming drifting from the therapy room below. Angela was still singing to his sons, and Andrew realized the truth he'd been avoiding. He wasn't keeping her because firing her was inconvenient. He was keeping her because she was the only person in 2 years who hadn't given up on his boys. And somewhere deep inside, he needed to see what happened when someone refused to accept impossible, even if it destroyed him. Week 4. Andrew stopped pretending he wasn't obsessed. Every night after the house went dark, he'd sit in his office and pull up hours of footage, fast-forwarding through empty hallways, pausing on moments that made his chest tight, rewinding scenes he needed to see again and again. Angela had changed the therapy room. Small things at first. She'd moved the wheelchairs closer together so the boys could see each other, replaced the sterile white blankets with colorful ones she'd brought from home, added 2 plants by the window, real ones. She said the boys needed to see things grow. Andrew didn't stop her. He should have. It wasn't protocol, but watching the room transform from cold and clinical to warm and lived in did something to him he couldn't name. Then the real changes started. Thursday afternoon, the licensed physical therapist arrived for the boys' weekly session.
Andrew watched through the camera as the woman, Dr. Patterson, she'd been coming for 18 months, examined each child, muscle tone, joint flexibility, reflexes. She started with Philip, moved his arm, then his leg. Her hands paused. She did it again. Andrew leaned toward the screen. Dr. Patterson looked up and called Angela over. They spoke quietly, heads bent together. Andrew couldn't hear the words clearly, but he caught fragments. Significant improvement in muscle tone. This is unusual. What specific exercises? Angela explained something, gesturing with her hands. Dr. Patterson nodded slowly, writing on her clipboard. Then she moved to Eric and Adam, examining them with renewed attention. When she left an hour later, she paused at the door, looked back at the boys, then at Angela. "Keep doing whatever you're doing," she said. "I'll adjust the official protocol to include your methods." Andrew sat back in his chair. His heart was pounding. That night, he didn't just watch current footage. He went back day by day, week by week. He watched Angela on the floor with Eric, moving his legs in walking patterns over and over. The same movement, the same rhythm, patient, steady, never frustrated, never giving up. He watched her hold Philip's hands, helping him bear weight on his feet for just seconds at a time, his small legs trembling, then holding, then trembling again. But each day he held a little longer. He watched her with Adam, doing arm exercises to music, his tiny limbs moving slowly at first, then smoother, more controlled. Andrew pulled up footage from the first week she arrived. The boys sat still in their wheelchairs, vacant, distant. Then footage from yesterday. Philip reaching for a toy across his tray, Eric's foot tapping to music, Adam holding his head steady, eyes tracking Angela as she moved around the room. The difference was undeniable. Andrew's hands trembled on the keyboard. He opened a new browser window and typed neuroplasticity in children with cerebral palsy. Articles flooded the screen. Medical journals, case studies, research papers from universities he recognized. He clicked the first one. Early intervention in pediatric cerebral palsy cases has shown remarkable results in neural pathway development. He clicked another. Repetitive motor pattern training can stimulate the brain to form new connections, bypassing damaged areas. And another. The infant and toddler brain demonstrates extraordinary plasticity. With consistent targeted intervention, children with CP have achieved mobility outcomes far exceeding initial prognosis. Andrew read until his eyes burned, until the words blurred together, until 3 in the morning crept past and the house sat silent around him. Everything Angela had said, the neural pathways, the brain's ability to rewire itself, the importance of early intervention, it was all there in black and white, published in medical journals, and he'd never looked, not once in 2 years. He'd taken those first doctors at their word, accepted their verdict like a death sentence, stopped researching, stopped questioning, stopped hoping. Andrew closed the laptop and sat in darkness. His sons were improving, actually improving, doing things those initial specialists said they'd never do, and he'd almost fired the woman responsible. Twice, his stomach turned. For 2 years, he'd poured money into maintaining his son's limitations, expensive wheelchairs, medical equipment, nurses who kept them comfortable in their diagnosis, but he'd never once fought for something more. Angela had been here 4 weeks, making $15 an hour, and she'd accomplished what his millions hadn't touched, because she believed, and he'd stopped believing the day Sarah died. Andrew's eyes burned, his throat closed. Shame. That's what this feeling was. Deep, crushing shame. He'd failed his sons, not by loving them too little, but by expecting too little, by accepting defeat before the fight even started. Sarah would never have accepted it. She would have researched every journal, consulted every specialist, tried every method. She would have fought with everything she had. But Sarah was gone, and Andrew had buried his fight with her, until Angela walked through his door and showed him what he'd forgotten, that giving up was a choice, and he'd been choosing it every single day. Andrew didn't sleep that night, or the next. He wandered his house like a ghost, passing rooms he'd stopped entering years ago. The formal dining room where he and Sarah had planned to host holiday dinners. The sunroom where she'd wanted to read while the boys played. The nursery with the yellow walls and the animal murals she'd painted herself. He opened that door for the first time in 18 months. Dust covered everything. The 3 cribs still stood in their half circle. A mobile of stars and moons hung motionless above them. Sarah's rocking chair sat in the corner, a folded blanket draped over its arm. Andrew stood in the doorway, unable to step inside. This was supposed to be their life. He closed the door and walked away. Friday morning, he skipped his office entirely. Instead, he sat in the hallway outside the therapy room, back against the wall, listening. Angela was inside with the boys. He could hear her voice through the door. "That's it, Philip. Just like that. See, your legs know what to do. We just have to remind them." Andrew closed his eyes. Eric, baby, look at you. You're holding that toy so tight. You're so strong. His throat ached. Adam, sweet boy, you watching your brothers. You're learning, aren't you? Taking it all in. Andrew pressed his palms against his eyes. What had he done? For 2 years, he'd hidden behind screens and spreadsheets. He'd paid people to love his sons because he was too broken to do it himself. He'd accepted their limitations as permanent because accepting defeat was easier than fighting for hope. And all the while, his boys had been waiting for someone to see them. Angela saw them. A stranger saw what their own father had been too blind to notice. Andrew heard laughter through the door. Small and breathy, but real. One of the boys, maybe Philip, maybe all three. His heart cracked. He should be in there. He should be the one making them laugh. He should be the one moving their legs and holding their hands and telling them they could do impossible things. But he didn't know how anymore. Sarah had taken that part of him when she died. Andrew stood up slowly. His legs felt weak. He walked back to his office, but he didn't turn on the monitors. Instead, he sat at his desk and stared at the photo he kept in his drawer. Sarah, 8 months pregnant, glowing. Her hands rested on her belly, and she was looking at the camera with so much hope it hurt to see. "I'm sorry," Andrew whispered. "Sorry for giving up. Sorry for hiding. Sorry for letting fear win." He put the photo back and opened his laptop. Not to watch footage this time. He searched for pediatric neurologists, specialists in early intervention, therapists who believed in neuroplasticity. He made a list of names, phone numbers, emails. If Angela could do this much in 4 weeks with nothing but faith and consistency, what could happen with real support, real resources, real belief?
Andrew stared at the list. For the first time in 2 years, he felt something stir in his chest. Not quite hope, but close. Something like possibility. He closed the laptop and stood up. It was almost afternoon. Almost time for the boys' rest period. Almost time. Andrew took a breath. He wasn't ready to walk into that room yet. Wasn't ready to face what he'd become or what he'd failed to be. But maybe tomorrow he'd try. He didn't know that tomorrow would change everything, that in less than 24 hours he'd open his phone and witness something that would bring him to his knees, that his whole world was about to shatter and rebuild itself in a single moment. But for now, Andrew sat in his quiet office holding the smallest seed of belief. And somewhere down the hall, Angela was teaching his sons to walk. Thursday afternoon, Andrew sat in his office, laptop open, reviewing quarterly reports for his company. Numbers blurred on the screen. He couldn't focus. His mind kept drifting to the therapy room. It was almost 3 o'clock. Angela would be finishing the boys' afternoon exercises. He'd watched the routine so many times he had it memorized. Music first, then motor pattern training, then the reaching exercises. His phone buzzed. Motion alert, living room. Andrew frowned. The boys were supposed to be in the therapy room at this hour. He picked up his phone and opened the security app, expecting to see Angela moving them for a snack or a change of scenery. The image took a moment to register. 3 wheelchairs sat against the wall, empty. Andrew's stomach dropped. His first thought was panic. Something happened, an emergency. The nurse had to rush them somewhere. Then he saw them. Center of the living room, hardwood floor gleaming in the afternoon light. Philip, Eric, Adam standing. Andrew's breath stopped. His 3 sons, his paralyzed sons, the boys' doctor said would never stand. They were upright, wobbly, shaking, but standing on their own 2 feet. Angela knelt in front of them, about 5 feet away. Her arms stretched wide open. Tears streamed down her face. "Come on, babies," she whispered. "Come to me. You can do it. 1 step." Andrew couldn't breathe. Philip moved first. His small foot lifted from the ground, hovered, then landed again an inch forward. A step. Andrew's hand flew to his mouth. Eric went next, more cautious. His legs trembled violently, but he moved. 1 foot, then the other. 2 steps. A sound escaped Andrew's throat, something between a gasp and a sob. Adam, the smallest, the one who kept his eyes closed, he stood there, shaking, arms out for balance. Angela reached toward him. "You can do it, sweet boy. I'm right here." Adam's foot lifted. It came down. Another lift. Another step. 3 steps. Andrew watched his youngest son walk toward Angela's outstretched arms. His phone slipped from his fingers. It clattered against the desk, but he didn't hear it. His knees buckled. Andrew slid down from his chair, back scraping against the desk, until he sat on the floor. His legs wouldn't hold him. On the phone screen, face down but still playing, he could hear Angela's voice. "Yes! Oh my God, yes! Look at you! Look at what you're doing!" The boys reached her. She gathered all 3 into her arms, pulling them against her chest, sobbing openly. "I knew it," she cried. "I knew you could. I knew it." Andrew sat on his office floor, unable to move. Tears poured down his face. His whole body shook. 2 years.
2 years of doctors saying never. 2 years of specialists confirming impossible. 2 years of accepting that his sons would spend their lives in wheelchairs. And there they were, standing, walking, reaching toward a woman who refused to believe what the world told her. Andrew pressed both hands against his face and wept. Not quiet tears, not controlled grief. This was something deeper, something breaking open inside him that had been locked away since the day Sarah died. Every failure, every betrayal, every night spent watching screens instead of holding his sons. The shame, the fear, the hope he'd buried so deep he forgot it existed. It all came flooding out in waves that shook his entire body. His sons could walk. His sons could walk, and he'd almost given up on them. Andrew didn't know how long he sat on that floor. Minutes, maybe longer. When he finally found the strength to stand, his legs felt hollow. He grabbed the edge of the desk and pulled himself up. His phone lay face down, still showing the living room feed. Andrew didn't pick it up. He didn't need to watch anymore. He walked out of his office on unsteady feet, down the long hallway, past the empty frames on the walls, past the silence he'd built around himself like armor. The living room door was open. He stopped in the doorway. Angela sat on the floor, all 3 boys in her lap. They were exhausted from the effort, small bodies limp against her chest. She held them like they were made of something precious. Her face was wet with tears, but she was smiling. She looked up when she sensed him there. Their eyes met. Andrew expected to see triumph in her face, pride, a look that said, "I told you so." But that's not what he saw. He saw compassion for him. Angela didn't say anything, just watched him with those steady eyes, holding his sons like she'd always held them, like they mattered. Andrew's legs gave out again. He knelt in the doorway, unable to take another step. "How?" His voice cracked. "How did you know?" Angela looked down at the boys, then back at him. "I didn't know, Mr. Grant." Her voice was soft, gentle. "I just believed." Something broke inside Andrew. The last wall, the final barrier. He crawled forward on his knees until he reached them. His hands shook as he touched Philip's face, then Eric's, then Adam's, his sons. For 2 years, he'd watched them through screens, loved them from a distance, kept his heart locked away because losing more would kill him. But they were here, alive, fighting, growing, and he'd almost missed it. Andrew gathered all 3 boys into his arms, pressed his face against their small heads, breathed in their scent. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I'm so sorry." He said it over and over, an apology for every day he'd spent hiding, every night he'd chosen fear over faith, every moment he'd let grief steal from them. Angela quietly moved back, giving him space, but Andrew reached out and grabbed her hand. "Stay," he said. "Please." She nodded. They sat there together on the living room floor, a broken father holding his sons, a faithful woman who'd refused to give up. 4 wheelchairs pushed against the wall, no longer needed.
Andrew looked at Angela through blurred vision. "You gave them their legs," he said. She shook her head slowly. "No, Mr. Grant. They gave themselves their legs. I just reminded them they could try." Andrew closed his eyes. Sarah would have loved this woman. Sarah would have loved this moment, and somewhere, he believed, she was watching. The afternoon light shifted through the windows, casting long shadows across the floor. The house felt different now. Not empty, not abandoned, alive. Andrew held his sons tighter and let himself feel something he'd forgotten existed. Hope. Not fragile hope, not cautious hope. Real hope. The kind that costs everything and gives back more. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring. More therapy, more work, more challenges. But for the first time in 2 years, Andrew Grant wasn't afraid of tomorrow because he finally understood miracles don't need permission. They just need someone brave enough to believe they're possible.